Picture this. It's 2004, and Ford is bleeding money faster than a Pinto leaks oil. Wall Street analysts are literally betting on bankruptcy. The automotive press is writing obituaries. And somewhere in Dearborn, a group of Ford executives looks at their spreadsheets, then looks at each other, and says, "You know what would fix this? Let's spend somewhere around $500 million making a car look like it's from 1969. I'm not joking. This is how one of the most remarkable automotive comebacks of the 2000s began. The year was 2005. While every other automaker was chasing futurism, Audi with the TT, BMW with their controversial flame surfacing, everyone trying to look like they were designing spaceships, Ford decided to build a time machine. They took roughly $500 million and bet everything on nostalgia. The financial press called it corporate suicide. Automotive journalists called it desperate. Ford called it the S197 Mustang. And against all odds, against every prediction, against basic business logic, it worked. Hell froze over, and Detroit built something brilliant. But here's what makes this story truly insane. Ford wasn't just betting on a design philosophy. They were betting on a brand new platform that adapted sophisticated engineering DNA from their premium DEW98 program. The same architecture philosophy used in the Lincoln LS and Jaguar S-Type. They were betting on a V8 engine using 3-valve technology developed alongside their truck program. And they were doing all of this while their company was circling the drain so hard, executives were reportedly preparing for Chapter 11 discussions. Ford executives apparently put down the spreadsheets and picked up common sense. Miracles do happen. The result? 300 horsepower. 300. From a mass production V8 that cost under 25 grand. 0 to 60 in 5 seconds flat, according to MotorWeek's instrumented testing. A quarter mile in 13.6 seconds at over 100 miles per hour. Verified by car and driver. And a base price of just $24,995. The 2005 Ford Mustang GT didn't just save the Mustang nameplate, it single-handedly resurrected an entire segment of the American automotive industry. This is the story of how Ford turned desperation into domination. Let's set the scene properly. By 2004, Ford was in serious trouble. The company that put America on wheels was hemorrhaging cash. Their previous Mustang, the SN95, had grown stale after a decade of incremental updates. Sales were declining. Enthusiasts were bored. And worse, the platform underneath that Mustang was the Fox architecture, a design that dated back to 1978. Not 1988, not 1998, 1978. The same year disco was dying and everyone was pretending Star Wars was still cool. Ford had been selling Mustangs on bones older than most of their customers. Car and Driver said it best in their 2005 comparison test. And I quote, "At last, the Fox platform, which wasn't all that impressive even when it debuted on the Fairmont in 1978, has been let out to pasture. 26 years. 26 years. Ford had been selling Mustangs on a platform designed for economy sedans from the Carter administration. That's not engineering longevity. That's corporate neglect wrapped in badge engineering. That's milking a cow until it turns into jerky. So Ford had a choice. They could keep milking the Fox platform until the brand died completely. The safe, bean counter-approved option. Or they could swing for the fences with something radically different. Something that would either save the company or accelerate its demise. Guess which option they chose? They went full send on a design that looked like it had escaped from a 1967 fever dream. And they built it on a brand new platform inspired by their premium Lincoln LS architecture but engineered specifically to keep Mustang affordable. The engineers were apparently sober this time. Shocking, I know. Let that sink in. The Ford Mustang, arguably the most iconic American muscle car nameplate, was now built on the new D2C platform. Ford's engineers studied their sophisticated DEW98 architecture from the Lincoln LS program and adapted similar front suspension geometry and mounting points, but simplified everything else to hit that crucial $25,000 price point. The new platform added 5.8 inches to the wheelbase compared to the old Fox. That's not a minor tweak, that's a whole new car. I checked my notes 3 times. This is actually good. I need you to appreciate the insanity of this moment. A company on the verge of bankruptcy. Wall Street predicting doom. Industry analysts laughing at the retro concept. And Ford's response? Hold my beer. We're building a 1969 fastback with premium engineering DNA on a budget. Corporate courage or corporate delusion? Let's find out. Under that retro hood sat something genuinely impressive. A 4.6-liter SOHC V8 with a unique 3-valve per cylinder design. 2 intake valves, 1 exhaust valve per cylinder. This wasn't some corporate cost-cutting measure disguised as innovation. Ford developed this 3-valve technology alongside their F-Series truck program, but optimized the Mustang version for higher RPM performance applications. The aluminum cylinder heads shared the basic architecture with the Triton truck engines, but were tuned specifically for a sports car's power band. It's disgustingly well engineered, offensively competent. The numbers? 300 horsepower at 5750 RPM, 320 pound-feet of torque at 4250 RPM, all from an engine with variable cam timing and a dual-mode intake manifold that switched between short and long runners depending on RPM. This wasn't caveman technology. This was legitimate engineering disguised in nostalgic bodywork. Ford built a modern sports car and wrapped it in your grandfather's fantasy. And it actually works. It's irritatingly reliable, suspiciously good value, and the performance, verified by period testing, not marketing brochures. MotorWeek tested it at 0 to 60 in 5 seconds flat. 5 seconds flat. Car and Driver got 5.2 with the coupe. Motor Trend clocked 5.1. These weren't hand-tuned press cars with magical engines. These were production vehicles pulling times that would have been supercar territory just a decade earlier, for under 25 grand. Your neighbor's Porsche Boxster cost twice as much and wasn't any faster. Let that marinate. But here's where the S197 really showed its teeth. The handling. Remember that new D2C platform with the extended wheelbase? It came with McPherson struts up front, geometry inspired by the Lincoln LS setup, and a completely revised 3-link solid axle in the rear with coil springs, performance-tuned shocks, and a panhard rod. Was it still a solid axle? Yes. Did enthusiasts complain? Of course they did. Enthusiasts complain about everything. Did it matter? Not when Car and Driver recorded 0.87 G on the skid pad. Numbers don't lie. Pedants do. The brakes alone deserved a trophy. Ford gave the GT 4-wheel disc brakes with roughly 18% more swept area than the previous generation. Aluminum calipers. Pirelli P. 0 Nero tires on 17-inch alloy wheels. This wasn't a muscle car pretending to handle. This was a muscle car that had actually been to finishing school. It could run with a Nissan 350Z in the canyons and embarrass the heavier Pontiac GTO on a road course while doing it. An American muscle car that handles. What a concept. Speaking of competition, and if you're enjoying this breakdown of Ford's greatest corporate gamble, do me a favor and hit that subscribe button. The 2005 Mustang GT didn't just outperform expectations. It outperformed actual competitors in comparison tests. Motor Trend put it head-to-head against the 2004 Pontiac GTO, a car with a Corvette-derived LS1 V8 making 350 horsepower. And the Mustang won the comparison. Not in a straight-line drag race, but in the complete package. They literally wrote, "The American pony is faster and nimbler than the Australian-bred goat. 300 horsepower versus 350. 50 less horses on paper. But in real-world comparison testing, handling, value, style, the complete driving experience, the Mustang took the trophy. The GTO cost more, weighed more, had more power on paper, and still lost the comparison to a retro-styled pony car built on Ford's new D2C architecture. Now the GTO was absolutely a missile in a straight line. Nobody's disputing that. But when magazines evaluated the total package, the Mustang won. That's not luck. That's knowing what buyers actually want. But the real victory wasn't against Pontiac, it was against absence. See, when the 2005 Mustang launched, there was no Camaro. Chevrolet had killed the F-body in 2002, 3 years earlier, citing declining sales and lack of interest in pony cars. Chevrolet looked at the segment and said, "This market is dead." Ford looked at the same segment and said, "Hold my retro rendering." One company gave up, the other doubled down. Guess which one was right? The S197's success proved Chevrolet spectacularly wrong. So spectacularly wrong that GM spent the next several years desperately developing a response. That response, the fifth-generation Camaro, wouldn't arrive until 2010. Ford had the modern retro muscle car market essentially to itself for 5 years. That's not a head start. That's a victory lap while your competitor is still looking for their running shoes. Chevrolet killed the Camaro because they thought no one wanted pony cars. Ford proved them catastrophically wrong with receipts. Let that marinate for a second. Chevrolet killed the Camaro in 2002. Ford launches the S197 in 2005 and dominates. 5 years later, Chevrolet comes crawling back with their own retro design, directly inspired by the success Ford created. The student became the teacher, and the teacher was playing catch-up. Plot twist. Ford didn't screw this up. They actually nailed it. Dodge wasn't immune either. The Challenger, absent from Dodge showrooms since 1974, made its triumphant return in 2008. 3 years after the Mustang S197 proved the retro concept worked. Coincidence? Please. But here's the ultimate irony. By early 2024, both the Camaro and the Challenger were dead. Discontinued. Gone. Again. The Mustang didn't just start the modern pony car wars, it outlived the competition to become the last V8 standing. Ford's desperate gamble didn't just save a segment, it built a dynasty that buried its rivals. And Ford made a bold move with the lineup hierarchy. At launch in 2005, there was no SVT Cobra, no Shelby GT500 yet. The Mustang GT was the undisputed king of the hill. This meant the volume seller wasn't living in the shadow of a halo car immediately. For about 25 grand, you were buying the top dog Mustang. It was powerful enough to embarrass most things on the road, affordable enough that normal humans could actually buy one, and styled dramatically enough that people would remember seeing it. The GT wasn't just the good value option. For 2 years, it was the only performance option, and it carried that burden beautifully. The styling. Let's talk about that styling. Lead designer Sid Ramnarese and his team didn't just reference the 1967 Mustang, they obsessed over it. The long hood, short deck proportions, the tri-bar taillights, the aggressive shark nose, the sequential turn signals. Every detail screamed, we know what made the original special, and we're bringing it back. But with modern safety structures, modern crash standards, and modern aerodynamics. This was heritage engineering, not heritage cosplay. Ford understood the assignment and actually delivered. The interior got similar treatment. Twin cowl dashboard design inspired by the original, round gauges with retro typography, aluminum trim accents, physical buttons that actually worked. Imagine that in 2005, in an era when every manufacturer was covering their dashboards in cheap plastic and calling it modern. Ford gave buyers an interior that felt intentional. Not groundbreaking, but intentional. And sometimes, intentional is exactly what a muscle car needs. It wasn't trying to be a BMW, it was trying to be a Mustang. Shockingly, that worked. What really made the S197 special was how it handled its compromises. Because every car has compromises, and honest engineers admit them. Yes, it still had a solid rear axle instead of the independent setup from the Lincoln LS. But Ford tuned it properly with the 3-link design, panhard rod, and separate coil springs and dampers. A massive improvement over the old 4-link Fox setup. Yes, the base V6 was forgettable. But nobody bought a Mustang for the V6, and the GT's V8 delivered. Yes, the interior materials weren't Audi quality, but they weren't trying to be. Ford knew exactly what this car was supposed to be, and they executed that vision without apologizing for it. Uncomfortably impressive for Detroit. The transmission choices reflected this clarity. The 5-speed Tremec T3650 manual was precise enough for enthusiasts, durable enough for street abuse, and available on every GT. The 5-speed automatic, shared with the Thunderbird and Lincoln LS, was adequate. Not great, not terrible, adequate. But here's the thing about Mustangs. The majority of buyers who wanted a GT wanted the stick. Ford knew their audience. They gave the people what they wanted. That's not revolutionary, that's just competence. But from Detroit in 2005, competence felt revolutionary. Safety also got a serious upgrade, something Ford desperately needed after years of bad PR. The new D2C platform was significantly stiffer than the Fox. Front and rear crumple zones were properly engineered. Side impact protection was built into the structure, not added as an afterthought. The S197 wasn't just safer than the SN95, it was reportedly safer than most of its competitors in that price range. Progress, wrapped in nostalgia. Ford actually thought about the humans inside the car. What a novel concept. The market responded immediately. Ford reportedly moved over 160,000 units in the first model year alone, making it one of the most successful Mustang launches in decades. Dealer markups were common. People were paying over MSRP just to get one faster. Waiting lists formed. Ford had to increase production to meet demand. The company that Wall Street had written off was suddenly the hottest thing in showrooms. Not with an SUV, not with a truck, with a rear-wheel drive muscle car that looked like it belonged in a Steve McQueen movie. Investors were confused. Enthusiasts were thrilled. And the cultural impact extended beyond sales figures. Need for Speed video games featured the S197 prominently. Street racing culture, whatever was left of it after Fast and Furious, embraced the new Mustang. Tuners discovered the Modular V8 responded beautifully to forced induction. Suddenly, Mustang meetups weren't filled with aging Fox bodies and nostalgia. They were filled with modern, relevant performance cars driven by a new generation of enthusiasts. Ford made Mustangs cool again. That's not nothing. Think about that timeline. 2002, Camaro dies. 2004, Ford bets everything on retro. 2005, S197 launches and dominates. 2008, Challenger returns. 2010, Camaro returns. By 2024, all three are still selling. Ford didn't just save the Mustang. Ford single-handedly resurrected the American pony car wars, from near bankruptcy to industry trendsetter in one model cycle. That's not luck. That's vision executed flawlessly, or the luckiest guess in automotive history. Probably both. But let's be honest about the flaws, because every car has them, and pretending otherwise insults your intelligence. The solid rear axle, while competently tuned with the 3-link and panhard rod setup, still wasn't the independent rear suspension from the Lincoln LS that some enthusiasts wanted. On rough roads, the rear end could get squirrely in ways that more sophisticated suspensions wouldn't. The 3-valve V8, while torquey and reliable, wasn't as refined as the future Coyote engine that would eventually replace it. And the interior plastics, while improved from the Fox era, were still Ford plastics. They creaked. They rattled. They were aggressively mediocre. The weight was also notable, around 3,500 pounds for the coupe depending on options. These weren't featherweights. The original 1967 Mustang weighed around 3,000 pounds. The S197 added nearly 500 pounds of safety equipment, sound deadening, and modern convenience features. Progress has mass, apparently, but that mass didn't stop it from being faster than lighter competitors. Power overcomes weight. Ford understood that equation. None of those flaws mattered. Not really. Because the S197 succeeded precisely because Ford understood what buyers actually wanted. Not what focus groups said. Not what analysts predicted. But what actual humans with actual money actually wanted. They wanted a car that looked like America. They wanted a V8 that sounded like thunder. They wanted performance that could embarrass most things on the road. And they wanted all of it for under 30 grand. The S197 delivered on every single one of those promises. The compromises were acceptable because the core experience was undeniable. Today, clean S197 GT examples are becoming genuine collectibles, particularly first-year 2005 models. Prices that bottomed out around $8,000 to $10,000 a few years ago are climbing steadily. Enthusiasts are recognizing what this car represented. Not just performance, but a moment when Detroit actually listened. A moment when corporate bean counters got overruled by people who understood what made cars special. That's rare. That's worth preserving. That's worth paying more for. The 2005 Ford Mustang GT S197 wasn't just a successful car. It was a thesis statement. It proved that heritage design could be commercially viable in the modern era. It proved that American manufacturers could compete with imports on handling and refinement while keeping prices accessible. It proved that betting on nostalgia wasn't automatically corporate suicide. Sometimes it's corporate genius. And most importantly, it proved that Ford, even at its lowest point, still had the capacity for greatness. They just needed to stop overthinking and start building what people actually wanted. Wall Street said Ford was finished. The press said retro design was a gimmick. Chevrolet said the pony car market was dead. Ford built the S197 anyway, with DW98-inspired engineering, performance-tuned 3-valve technology, and a design straight from 1969. And it worked. It worked so spectacularly that it saved a company, revived a segment, and forced every competitor to follow suit. Roughly $500 million on nostalgia. Best money Ford ever spent. Sometimes the crazy bet is the smart bet. Sometimes desperation breeds brilliance. And sometimes Detroit actually gets it right. Next time, we're exploring another moment when Detroit got it right against all odds. Subscribe and hit that bell so you don't miss it. If you owned an S197, or you're thinking about buying one before prices climb higher, drop your story in the comments. I want to hear from the people who believed in this car when it was new. This is Car Chronicles, where $500 million gambles sometimes actually pay off.